Whilst many people appreciate the importance of managing risk, some do not understand the context of this. So let's try and add some context and meaning. In brief, let's spreadsheet this. The first thing we would do is to identify the assets. Now, a service asset is made up of resources and capabilities. A resource is something tangible, such as money, whereas capability is more intangible, such as the management applied to the money. Or an application would be deemed as a resource, and the process applied to it would be deemed as the capability. The two together make up a service asset. So in this example, whilst we are going to keep this simple and brief, we should not forget that capabilities such as knowledge and expertise should also be captured as assets. Okay, let's identify a server as one asset and a laptop as another asset. So we have identified two assets. We now need to identify potential threats which these assets are exposed to. Okay, so let's say that the server is exposed to an earthquake, a flood, and a power failure. And let's say that the laptop is exposed to spilling coffee. We now have identified a number of threats which these assets are exposed to. We now need to identify the impact which these threats would have if they became reality. So we are going to weight these impacts by scoring these impacts accordingly. In this example, we are saying that the score of 5 relates to the highest impact and 1 relates to the lowest impact. Okay, so clearly an earthquake would have the highest impact. So we will score this a 5. And the same in the event of a flood. Now, whilst power failures would not justify the same score compared with an earthquake or a flood, power failures can have a significant impact. So we will score this 3. And of course, spilling coffee does not have the same impact as an earthquake or a flood or a power failure. However, such events are extremely disruptive. So we will score this with a 2. Now we need to identify the probability, meaning the likelihood of these threats occurring, because this is what risk is about: impact and probability. And we will apply the same scoring format. Of course, the probability will vary depending on the environment, type of work, and industry, etc. In our example, an earthquake is unlikely, so we will score this a 1. And the same for a flood, so we will also score this 1. Now, in this example, we have had 2 power failures in the last 5 years, so this is quite likely. Therefore, we will score this with a 3. And as for spilling coffee, we can absolutely guarantee that this will happen, so we will score this 5. So now let's multiply these scores. Firstly, we said the impact of an earthquake would be 5. However, the likelihood, the probability, would be 1. So 5 multiplied by 1 equates to 5. We said the impact of a flood would also be a 5 and the probability would be 1. So 5 multiplied by 1 equates to 5. We said the impact of a power failure would be 3 and the probability would be 3. So 3 multiplied by 3 equates to 9. And we said the impact of spilling coffee would be 2, however the probability would be 5. So 2 multiplied by 5 equates to 10. So in this example, where will I be focusing on and where will I spend my money? Clearly, I will be focusing on potential power failures and spilling coffee. If I had an unlimited budget, then I would spend on everything I could possibly think of. However, life is not like that. We have limited budgets and have to work within such budgets. As long as we identify, understand and accept the risks which we are exposed to, and of course look to minimise where possible. I recall the CEO of one company stating that whilst every company has different risk profiles, there is one risk common to all companies, and one that is often overlooked. And this is the lack of accurate information, meaning people working from different pages, as to speak. and this is a risk in itself. Now, before we finish on this, let me also highlight some additional points for clarity. Firstly, the term risk capacity relates to the investment required to support current and committed operations, whereas risk appetite relates to things that we are in pursuit of, such as new products and services or entering into new market spaces. Therefore, we have to measure our appetite for risk. In fact, if you work in a high velocity environment where speed to market is essential, then you need an appetite for risk to succeed, because in such an environment, the biggest risk is doing nothing. Now, risk assessment and management can be both qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative is just like what we have done here in this example, whereas quantitative is actually assessing and measuring the actual cost of such impacts. I hope this all makes sense and that you found this helpful, or at least added some clarity to the topic of risk.